Hello everyone. I'm going to record now Shabbos Daf Mem Ches. We're up to the second line from the top, Rabba Reb Zeira. Before I begin, I just want to elaborate on something. Back on Daf Mem Hey Amid Aleph, 3 blot ago, the Gemara had mentioned that according to Reb Shimon, he agrees with Muktzah Machmas Mitzvah. The Gemara brought a raya because it said if you have Noi Sukkah, they're Muktzah until Motzoi Shmini Atzeres. And even Reb Shimon holds of that. And how do we know? Because there was another brisa that says that if you had a hut on Pesach or Shavuos, that wood fell off. So according to Reb Shimon, you're allowed to be metaltal it. But the wood of a Sukkah's Hachag, a Sukkah of Sukkahs, Reb Shimon's Moida is Muktzah. So you see, Reb Shimon is Moida to Muktzah Machmas Mitzvah. And that was fine. There was a line added though that said, but im hisna hakoil lifi tanoi, that if you made a tanai, it all depends on your tanai. So my grandson pointed out, based on the Gemara in Beya Daf Lamed, that line im hisna la hakoil lifi tanoi, although it sounds like it's talking about the sukkah of Chag, the sukkah of Sukkahs, that you can make a tanai on the sukkah, but the Gemara in Beya says no, you can only make a tanai on the noi sukkah. I think the svara is, I wasn't ma'ayin, but the noi sukkah is not an integral part of the sukkah. I mean, you dedicated it to the sukkah. So if you dedicate it to the sukkah, Reb Shimon holds it's also uktzil mitzvasei. But if you made it tanai, so you didn't want it to be dedicated to the sukkah, so it's not dedicated to the sukkah, so you can have a no from it during Chol Hamoed. But a sukkah, you have a chiyuv to have a sukkah for 7 days. You have a chiyuv to have a sukkah for 7 days, you can't make a tanai, then I'm going to take apart the sukkah in order to use it for myself. Because the Torah has mandated you should have a sukkah for 7 days. So there, the Gemara says that tanai, even according to Reb Shimon, will not help. Okay. Now getting back to our Gemara in Bamet Taimnin, so the last thing we learned yesterday was that, again, the rules are, on Erev Shabbos, you can be matmin, you can insulate with something that's mekayim hevel, that maintains heat. But you can't be matmin in something which is moisiv hevel, which increases heat. Because if you're matmin in something which increases heat, I'm afraid you might be matmin in remetz, which is a collection of ash and coals. And then if you're matmin beremetz, on Friday night you might come to stir the coals. On Shabbos, you're not even allowed to be matmin b'dover ha-mekayim hevel, even in something that merely insulates. And there's an interesting fear. If you will take, let's say, a chulent Friday night and decide that you want to insulate it so it's warm for Shabbos morning, and you discover maybe that it cooled off. So now you're going to get nervous because it cooled off, and chas v'shulam, because of your frustration, you might come to actually heat the chulent. So therefore, they don't want you to be matman anything, afila in something that just retains heat, al gzeira, that if you see that it cooled off, you might come to cook it up again. An interesting chashash, person gets frustrated, he'll come to Mechal Shabbos. So don't even get involved in the project altogether, and don't be matman on Friday night, even on something that's mekayim hevel. The Mishnah listed as one of the things that's moisiv hevel is olive pulp. After you squeeze out after you got rid of, you got the oil out. The Gemara wanted to know, what about sesame seed pulp? The Gemara wanted to bring a raya. What happens if you were matman in something that's mekayim hevel? You did something Erev Shabbos kosher v'yosher, and now you want to put it on top of zaysim pulp, on top of olive pulp. It's aser. So you see, olive pulp is aser, but sesame pulp is mutter. Where it says to put on top of, when it's insulated by other stuff, you just want to put it on top of, maybe there we're only machmer on olive pulp. But if you're going to actually insulate the entire pot Erev Shabbos, maybe it would be aser even in sesame pulp. So that was not decided. The next piece of Gemara, it sounds relatively simple. I'm going to use Taisa's pshat, which I understand better. Then I'll tell you Rashi's pshat, but I don't quite understand Rashi's pshat. First, we'll just do the story and translate. Rabba Reb Zeira, Iklu Lebei Resh Galusa. They visited the Resh Galusa. Chazyua, they saw Lahu Avda, a slave in the Resh Galusa's house, a servant. Da'anach Kuza Demaya, that put a jug of water, Apuma de Kumkuma, on top of a kumkum, on top of a hot water kettle. Is V'nazge Rabba. Rabba yelled at him why he put a cold container of water on top of a hot water kettle. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, brings two pirushim. One is that this hot water kettle was Aymer al Eish, was on the fire, or it was a Kli Rishon that had been off the fire. Anyway. Amalei Reb Zeir, so Reb Zeir says to Rabba, Maishana mimechem al gabi mechem. Why are you yelling at him? Why is it worse than taking a container of hot water to put it on top of another container of hot water? Amalei, so Rabba told him it's apples and oranges. Hasam ukumi komokin. In the case of a hot water kettle on top of a hot water kettle, it's hot on top of hot, so that's okay. But hacha eludi kamoilid. But here it's a cold water container on top of a hot water kettle, and that's aser. So one is black and one is white. Okay. According to Tosfos, pshat is simple. If you have water that's boiled, it's absolutely hot, so you can't boil it anymore. So there's no problem with putting it on top of another hot water kettle. It's not even called, first of all, it's not called hatmana, because Tosfos would hold hatmana is only if you're enveloping it, so you're not enveloping it in anything, you're just putting it on top, number one. And as far as making it hotter, it can't be hotter, it is hot, so it's not a problem. But putting a cold water container on top of a hot water kettle, even though, says Tosfos, the intention of the Eved was only to make it lukewarm, but Tosfos says, I'm concerned that if you leave the cold water thing on top too long, you might come to boil it. So therefore, cold water on top of a hot water kettle is usher because you might come to boil it. Hot water on top of hot water is not a problem. Very simple. Very simple. The only problem is that has nothing to do with hatmana. The question is, the Rabbeinu Yomi asks on Tosfos, why is that in our parak? So now I'm going to try Rashi's pshat, but I'm going to tell you right away what my kashas are. So according to Rashi, it would seem that hatmana is even if you don't envelop it completely, even though it's only touching on one side. So now, a hot water kettle on top of a hot water kettle is okay, because the top one is hot. Now the bottom one, the explanation is not considered moisif hevel. Why? Because since the bottom one, let's assume, is not on the fire, so if it's not on the fire, it's cooling down, so it's not moisif hevel. But l'chayr, the bottom one is going to help the top one to keep its heat, and to be mekayim hevel, if you're going to call it atmana, is aser b'Shabbos. So I don't understand, I'm telling you, I don't understand how it is that you can put a hot water kettle on top of a hot water kettle, if that's considered atmana, even though the bottom one is not considered moisiv hevel, because it's not oimer ala eish and it's cooling down, but even to be mekayim hevel is also aser. But seemingly that was mutter. On the other hand, the cold water container on top of the hot water kettle is aser. Why? Because there you're warming it up. So what does that have to do with atmana? I mean, again, I don't know Rashi's pshat, but Tosfos pshat I understand. That we're not talking about atmana, we're talking about hot on top of hot is not going to boil because it's already hot, and the bottom one is not moisiv hevel because it's cooling down, but cold on top of hot, even though he only wants to make it lukewarm, I'm afraid if you leave it long enough, it'll boil. Okay. Next, Hadar Chazye de Paris Tas Todar Apume de Kuva. He then saw that this Eved put a kerchief on top of a barrel of fluid, water or wine, and he put a keli on top of the kerchief. Rabbi yelled at him. Why are you yelling at him? So Rabbi told him, keep watching, you'll see why I'm yelling. As the keli weighed down on the kerchief dipped into the fluid and it got wet. So the Eved took the kerchief and he squeezed it out. And you see, there's schita. Omar Leiser Abzeir says to Rabbi, how come everybody has barrels with a sheet on top of the barrel and you're never upset about that? Over there, the sheet on top of the barrel was meant to cover the barrel. So if it gets wet, nobody cares, that's what it's made for. But here he took a fine kerchief and put it on top of the barrel and put a keli on top. That kerchief is going to get wet, somebody's going to squeeze it out, and that's why he was upset. We learned in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to insulate with straw or pulp from grapes or soft materials. Soft materials could be wool or cotton or pieces of worn out garments, and if they're moist, the Mishnah said if they're moist, then they're moisiv hevel, and it's usher to insulate in them Erev Shabbos, but if they're dry, you're allowed to. Now these soft pieces of fabric, these soft pieces of cotton or wool, were meant either to be spun into thread or to be pressed into felt. So this is commercial material. That's muktzah machmas chsarin kis. It's muktzah because it's meant for business purposes. However, just if you decide to be matmin a pot in it, if it's dry and you're allowed to, so good for you. So you decided to use it, now it's not muktzah. So boyimine Rav Adu bar Masna mi'abaye muchin shetaman behem ma'ul taltlan b'Shabbos. If you took some of this muktzah stuff, some of this fiber or soft material, which was destined to be made into felt, but you were matmin a pot in it erev Shabbos, so now does it lose its status of muktzah? So Amar Leis Abaye said, why should it lose its status? Just because one time the man didn't have a box of straw to insulate with, so he used this stuff for insulation for a one-time deal, doesn't mean that he has just abandoned it and he's going to leave it as hefker. This still has a commercial purpose, but one time and nobody was looking, so he used it in order to insulate a pot, and afterwards he's going to make felt out of it. So l'chayr it should remain muktzah, just because it was used once for Shabbos insulation. Leima Messiah, maybe have a proof to Abaye's idea that just because you insulated with it once, it does not lose its designation as commercial merchandise, which is muktzah machbas chsar and kis. Because the Brisa says, Taimnin begizet semer, betzipet semer, you can be matmin your pot with shearings of wool if they're dry, or a wool mat, or l'shayna shalagaman, tongues of purple wool, ubemuchen, soft fabric, but ve'em metaltal enoisam, and it sounds like, and you can't be metaltal it anymore. So when you are matmin it in this stuff, and you dedicated it to be used for Shabbos, but once that's over, ein metaltal enoisam. After that, the next Shabbos or going forward, you can't be metaltal it because it's still commercial merchandise. The Gemara says, as far as that's concerned, the Brisa would not be approved because I can interpret the Brisa differently. Hachi kamar, the Brisa means to say two things. One halacha A, and another halacha B. Halacha A is that you can be matman in this type of woolen fiber or woolen fabric or soft fabrics, and it's considered, if it's dry, mekayim hevel, it maintains heat but doesn't increase heat, so kaim kol in hatmana it's mutter. And the second halacha is that, by the way, this stuff in a general state is muktzah because it's commercial stuff. It's two separate things. This is talking about hatmana's mutter because it's not meisav hevel, it's mekayim hevel, and this is talking about, since it's something which is meant for commercial purposes, it's muktzah. Hachi kamar im loy tamam behem, if you never did atmana, then ein metaltal enoisam because this stuff is muktzah. But perhaps if you already were matman in it, maybe you took the muktzah off. So what's the chiddush? So what are you teaching me? We know that you can be matman in soft stuff that it's dry and it's not considered meisav hevel, and the fact that it's muktzah, well, of course it's muktzah, isn't it? Stuff that's made for commercial purposes. The Gemara says, I would think, notwithstanding that these maybe bales of stuff are destined for commercial purposes, but right now you can sit on it. And since you can sit on it, maybe it does not have a din of muktzah, so the Brisa is teaching me that these bales of stuff and this type of fabric and fiber is muktzah. Fine, so I needed to know that. But it could very well be that Abaye was wrong. That once you used it for atmana, maybe you took the muktzah off it and it's never muktzah again. We're not sure. Maybe yes and maybe no, but this Brisa is no indication. Rav Chizda shara laduri udra lebeisadya b'Shabbos. Rav Chizda allowed you to put soft stuff back into a pillow, to stuff a pillow on Shabbos. Really? Eisver Rav Chanan bar Rav Chizda Rav Chizda. So Rav Chanan bar Chizda asked Rav Chizda, matir and beisat savra b'Shabbos. If you have a neck that's closed with a knot, so you're allowed to open the knot to open the neck, avaloi paischem, but you're not allowed to take a piece of fabric and put a hole in it, so now that you have a new head opening. And you're not allowed to put feathers or soft stuff into a pillow or any kind of a pillow, neither on Yontif and certainly not on Shabbos. So you see it's prohibited. The Gemara answers lekasha, there's no question. If it's brand new, then stuffing a pillow for the first time is considered tikkun mana. You're making a keli or makabapatish. You're finishing the product. But if it's an old pillow and you're just putting some stuff back in that fell out, that's not called making it. You're just putting it back, and that's okay. In fact, Tanya Nami Hochi, we learned in the Brisa, you're not allowed to fill this type of pillow with soft stuff on Yontiv and Tzorach Lember b'Shabbos, certainly not b'Shabbos. That's because you're making a pillow which is called Tikkun Mana, you're making a utensil. But nashru, if it fell out, machzir noisem b'Shabbos v'tzarich leimer b'yontiv. If it fell out, you're allowed to put it back by Shabbos, and certainly you're allowed to put it back b'yontiv. The next is a famous Gemara which we also find in Makkos. Amar Rav Yudah Marav al Pesach Beis Hatzaver b'Shabbos chayiv chatas. If you have a sheet and you make a hole in the center, so now you can put it over your head, and now you have a poncho, so you chayiv a chatas, because you just made a garment from a sheet. You made it into a garment that you can wear. Maskiv Rav Kana, so Rav Kana asks Akasha, Ma ben zulam agufas chavius. If you have a barrel that has a lid, and then you sealed the lid on top of the barrel using some clay, so why is it mutter to crack the clay in order to remove the lid off the barrel? Amalei says it's olive based. Amalei Rava, so Rava says Ze chibur v'zein a chibur, because the sheet was one unit of sheet. It was a sheet, and it was all attached as one piece of fabric, and it was not a poncho. When you made a hole in it, you changed it and you turned it into a poncho. So that's called making a utensil on Shabbos near chayiv. Whereas the barrel was a barrel and the lid was a lid. Just because something was sealing the lid to the barrel, okay, but now that you removed the seal, you didn't create a lid, you didn't create a barrel. It's like opening a jar of pickles. When you open a jar of pickles, you didn't create a jar, you didn't create a lid. The lid was there, it was just on tight. So here, even though you have to crack the clay on top of it, you have not really created anything new. You have just enabled to release the lid of the barrel from the barrel, but the two were there before. Just to speak out something for a minute. So you're not allowed to make a new utensil, but you can fix an old one. But fixing an old one is only if there's no effort involved, says Taisvis. But if you have to have a lot of effort involved to fixing an old one, that's also tikkun mana. As we just learned the other day, if you have a candelabra that one of the shafts came out, you're not allowed to force it back in tightly. According to some opinion, was even Isser Deraisa, or at least an Isser Derabanan, because since it involves a lot of effort to put it in. But putting some stuffing back into a pillow is no big deal. Taisa says if there's a string in a garment that came out, for instance, let's say the string of a hood, so you're allowed to restring it because you're not stringing it for the first time, you're just putting it back. But Taisa says there's two qualifications. Number one, if it's a string that you normally make a knot at the end, so then you're not allowed to restring it, because I'm afraid at the end you'll make a knot and it'll be a kesher shel kayama, which that will lead to an Isser Deraisa. Or if it's very difficult to restring it, so the difficulty in restringing it makes it usher, even though you're really restringing it. Because the difficulty quotient, the difficulty issue, makes it usher even though it's repairing. The Tosefta says the same halachas regarding shoelaces. If your shoelaces come out, you're allowed to put the shoelaces back in. Magen Avram says, but you can't put new shoelaces into a shoe, because that's considered tikkun mana. And the Eliyahu Rabbah says you can only put back the same shoelaces as before, but you can't put in new shoelaces either. Now, we talked before about things that are attached and not attached. So we're going to have a totally non-related discussion here that has nothing to do with Bemet Taimnin. It has to do with what happens if you have item B which is attached to item A, but not because B and A really need each other. They happen to be two different things that happen to be attached. Are they considered united so that if you're matame A, B becomes tame, or vice versa? So Rami le Reb Yirmi le Reb Zeir. Reb Yirmi asked Reb Zeir a contradiction. Tanan, there's a Mishnah in Uktzin, Sholol Shel Kaifsin. If you have a string of laundry, somebody that used to attach maybe a shirt with a sock with a pair of pants, with a pair of pants with a handkerchief, the reason they attached it is so that when you wash it in a river or somewhere, something shouldn't get lost. So it was all attached on they put a stitch in to attach them. Or shal shel shel maftechos. If you have keys, you don't want to lose them, so you put them on a string. So the string is only holding the keys together, but not because they're related to each other. You just don't want to lose them. Or vabeget shutaf or beklayim. Let's say you have two pieces of wool and you have a stitch of linen that's holding them together, but you're going to remove them. You're going to remove these pieces of laundry that were stitched together. You're going to remove the keys from the string, and you're also going to remove the linen stitch between the two garments of wool. Chibur l'tumah, it's considered united. B is considered united with A. Ad sheyaschel hatir, until you start actually removing it. Once you start removing it, then the two are considered disunited. When you're matame one, you're not matame the other. Alma, so you see, shaloi b'shas malacha nami chibur. That even though you finished laundering or you finished doing whatever you're doing, but until you don't start disattaching it, B and A are considered attached to each other, and if you're matame A, you're matame B. Urminu, so I'm going to ask you a contradiction. Makal shasa yad lekardum. If you have a piece of wood that was used as a handle for an axe, so chibur l'tumah b'shas malacha. While you're chopping, the handle and axe are considered one. When you're metame one part, you're metame the other. But b'shas malacha in shaloi b'shas malacha loy. The moment you finished working with it, it loses its din of oneness. It's not considered attached. So when you're metame one, you're not metame the other. So we have a contradiction. Before we said things that are attached, B with A, are considered attached until you start disattaching them, even though you're not using it anymore. And here you see the moment you stop using it, B and A, the handle and the blade, are considered disattached. Amar Lei, Sir Zera told Rabbi Yirmiyah, it's apples and oranges. Hasam shaloi b'shas malacha adam asi l'zarkoi l'beinu eitzim. It seems that it was easy to make a handle. So you took a piece of wood, you made a handle, and you chopped. The moment you finish chopping, that handle is going in the garbage. So therefore, why isn't it in the garbage yet? I just didn't get around to it. But I don't usually keep a handle in the axe. So therefore, the moment you finished working, the handle and the blade are considered two different items. Here, even when you finish laundering, they used to keep the laundry still stuck together until you actually needed to use a piece, because if it'll get dirty, you'll be able to wash it all out. If it falls, you can wash it all out again at the same time. So it was useful to keep them together until you disassemble it. So when it comes to laundry, or it comes to keys, or it comes to two pieces of garments that are attached with a piece of linen, they're together until you disattach them, because it's useful to keep them attached. But if you have a handle with an axe, the moment you finished working, it's already, the handle is not necessary. I just haven't bothered to remove it, but they're considered two separate units. So I'm going to record this now, and then I'll record part 2.